Well, thanks everyone for giving us your afternoon. I think it's going to be a really sort of enriching, I know it's going to be a really sort of enriching conversation today about the sort of potential of technology within sort of the field of empathy studies. I'll very briefly sort of introduce our speakers today, and then I'm going to hand it over to them, and then we're going to sort of facilitate a conversation. But I thought I'd start with just a bit of an anecdote. And so recently I conversed with a mattress company to lodge a complaint and sort of, for them to issue a refund for a Silent Night mattress topper. A process that, at least in my imagination as a film buff, kind of recalled those images from Paul Thomas Anderson's film Punch Drunk Love, where Adam Sandler gets caught in that kind of web of exploitation with the Philip Seymour Hoffman character. Now, Unlike Sandler, I was, not met with sort of violent phone calls or, threats, extortion. I was quite the contrary. My complaint was met with a degree of empathy. There was an exchange of sentiments such as, "I'm sorry to hear that," or "I could certainly understand your concerns," or "that must have been frustrating. I'll do my best to help you." All these sort of gestures then, these empathetic kind of gestures. And though I recognize there is a sort of veiled attempt from, a chatbot to forge that emotional connection, a large learning modules kind of just stitching together, kind of stock empathetic responses, I felt oddly, even if it was momentarily, reassured. Now, though I can be cynical, I'm also techno-optimistic for my sins, and this moment of registration has really sort of stuck with me. It's partially out of sort of apprehension. I do, like all of you, I share those sort of fears of this technology when used incorrectly, but I'm also intrigued by its potential, and its potential especially within the sort of creative sector. I should probably say a note to future robots who will undoubtedly scrape the script, have mercy on me in the future. But, it's an experience which, it's not the first, and I know it'll certainly not be the last, but it's reprompted a question that I've been sort of turning around in my mind for some time now. It's a question that I sort of continue to interrogate through my sort of my endeavors with the Bristol Digital Game Lab. It's a question that I've sort of continued to explore over the last few years in my sort of collaborations with other scholars exploring TV and empathy. And it's a question that came back up in conversation with Ben just last week. And that question is it possible to elicit empathy through digital technologies and in digital worlds? And then the entire sort of, gamut of questions that comes with that. What are the implications of translating one's experience and tailoring it through the sort of narrative or, through sort of immersive technologies? What's the role of interactivity, agency? What are the sort of representational boundaries? And of course, what are the ethical implications? Now, today's speakers are navigating such questions and sort of entertaining the possibilities of technology in their sort of, respective kind of creative explorations that really endeavor to, forge empathy, that most human of connections, to connect, to sort of imagine and to immerse ourselves in another's perspective. I think it's an endeavor that, should be applauded. But of course, we're here today to have a conversation critically about it. So it gives me great pleasure to briefly introduce our speakers, who I'm sure will introduce themselves through their respective projects. We have Ben Solanky, of Empathy Action joining us today to talk about sort of technology and immersive experiences, immersive theatre. We have Shutong Lee, a doctoral researcher here at the University of Bristol, who's been doing some really fascinating stuff with sort of LiDAR scanning and sort of digital mapping. And we got Hassan Katan, sorry. Yeah, joining us remotely. But, I'm sure we're all going to sort of get something out of this conversation with these three speakers. So if you join me in a brief round of applause, and then I'm just going to hand over the mic to our speakers, and then rejoin me for a conversation.
Hi there. I'm a student of RINA. I'm second year PhD, and my research area is how to use immersive technology to bridge the experience knowledge gap. So as a Chinese international student, I was thinking, okay, if I go to UK, what UK looks like and what's the actually environment? So what can I learn about all the things? I think that's the research. That's the research I've liked. So and then I think can I make like a 3D environment of our department, and then I put every course trailer, a documentary trailer, so everyone can understand what they're gonna go through before they go into the uni. So I think it's gonna be benefit to a lot of students. So as for the beginning, I tried how can I make the 3D model. So I tried different methods, and that's the demonstration of what I've done. At the beginning, I just used the phone from iPhone, that's a scanner, and then I use like the scanning words is a photogrammetry. Once use the scanning words, scan this area, you can see it's mesh, and the shape is not very accurate, and the quality is quite low. And then I use another camera, which is iPad. When I use iPad, so that's version. Oh, that's the iPhone version, and that's the iPad version. So iPhone's camera is much better than the iPad, so it's much better than that one. However, I done calculation. If I use my phone to scan our department, it's gonna take like 20 hours to 40 hours. So at that time, if I want to solve this question, I have to find a way to do a proper scan with very fast, very high quality. And that is when I got this one, the 3D scanner from X-Ray. It's used 3D Go Spot. I'm gonna show you later. So that is a demonstration why I use this 3D scanner, and we put this 3D scanner in the headset, and that's how they look. So basically like real. So that's what you have seen in the headset. But however, like for the users of VR headset, the number is like 150 million. It's a very small number compared with like a mobile user 7 billion and computer user 3.6 billion. So I was thinking, most Chinese students perhaps they don't have headset before they come to UK. So how can I reach them? So we use 3GS. We developed another science based on website, and that's what we done. Okay. So it's very simple. You just click the URL and press them. And you are in the department. So you can use WSD to navigate. That's our cinema. That's where we are now. Hi. So that's a prototype. Like in my idea, I have to make 3 programs about this content, and that's just a 3D model. I got faster when I was doing the immersive art because my second supervisor, Paul Clark, he's the director of the immersive art and technology program. So I joined this course, and you can see it's very simple. You just press the we have some error in the UI science. We are solving it. So what we can do, for instance, you just press this main course. What you can learn, that's all the course we're gonna do. We didn't make all of them. For instance, that's the introduction to immersive art technology. And that's the unit information, that's how you're gonna be assisted. And that's documentary I made from our team, me and the editor. So I can show you. But there's no
Introduction to Immersive Art and Technology is a course that for the most of art students and most of social science students, they're gonna join together. The aim of...
Sorry. So something like that, like they're gonna show you what you gonna go through in the class and what is the assessment method and what is the outcome and interview of the grad students. Why I make this content? Because I've done the interview with the students, what you want to know, and that's the thing they want to know. So I make content for that. This kind of thing you cannot use 3D scanner, and you need to find a very fast method to transfer this message to them. I think video is very useful. And this kind of content, because like the 3D scanner price is lower and lower, a lot of companies do the things. And the computer performance ability is higher and higher. So I think in 3 years, this kind of content gonna be everywhere. Like in UK, they have like 160 university. I think 80% of gonna use this kind of content in 3 years. So that's my idea. So, and this part, I gonna introduce you like how the scanning things work. For instance, like this X-ray is very, very good. First thing you put your battery out. And second thing is like you use the main body of the scanner. So you can see like this part and this part is the camera, and this part is the radar. It gives you the point cloud. So it is very accurate about the shape, the schedule. Like the mistake of this all the thing together is like less than 3 cm. So that it can be used for construction, for use a lot of things. And what you can scan can show you. You use the scanner, open it, connect with your phone. I'm quite nervous. That's my first time in lecture. I'm sorry. Yeah. So when the machine is connected,
So how long did it take you to scan with the department?
one scan the department 40 minutes, 40, and before like 20 to 40 hours.
Right.
So, and we have very good quality about all the things.
How do you stitch between the rooms? So there's obviously a print that comes from this room, but then moving into that room.
That is very important because like when you scan, it's like 1 second is 24 frame, and there's a lot of data, and the software can process this data. So there are two methods about how you process if you go to the door. The first thing is you open all the door together before, and when you open the door before, and you can just go out. And second thing is when you scan. For instance, I can show you. Like if this door, you open it, and you don't let your camera see it. Then you open, and then you go out. Something like that.
Right.
So and that's how it works. I can show you. Like if you open this, so it's gonna have a sense about the environment. You have a question?
I have a question for this later.
Okay, it's okay. So you have like two kinds of data. The first data is a cloud point cloud. It's from the data, and the second thing is from the video camera.
Right.
So if you feel like you use this, you can say like you can have like your point cloud data, and it can show like the chair or something like that if it's been scanned. So that's the things I do to scan this like these 3D models. Okay,
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to briefly connect Ben to Hassan in the sense that the reason I met Ben was because my daughter studied acting, saved a load of money up, went off to the Strasbourg Institute in New York, and when she came back, a neighbour said, I'm working on a voluntary project, working with around refugees, and it's immersive theatre. I think Merce would be perfect. So Alison invited Merce to come and work with Ben. Ben did his immersive experience in Stroud, and me and my wife Alice went and experienced it and found it very powerful. And I immediately had the question, is it possible to do a digital version of this, so that rather than a church and 9 easy ups and 16 volunteers, and bearing in mind that they got 600 students through this experience in a week, primary school and secondary school students. But the question was, with less infrastructure, can you do the same thing? So that's where I came to it. I met Hassan very, very fortuitously. I was in Sheffield Documentary Festival and sat next to Hassan having a coffee. Started chatting. He said, I've just got £100,000 grant to do a film about displacement and refugee experience, because Hassan had worked on White Helmets, which was nominated and won an Oscar. And he said, I'm looking for an Arab-speaking editor. So I said, well, that's funny, because I've been adopted by a female editing collaborative called Stitch and Bitch, and I'm the kind of mascot, the only man allowed to go to their drinks events, I think, or something. And I introduced Hassan to one of their editors. And then when we were talking with Ben about the idea of this project going to a digital format, we thought really that we needed to have somebody whose voice and whose storytelling skills kind of matched the ambition. And so that's where Hassan joined the project. So Hassan, thank you for coming, and maybe you want to tell us a little bit about your current project that you're working on.
Nice to be with you, and really lovely to be yeah, I'm looking forward to come and see everyone here. Yeah, really lovely to see you all of you. My name is Hassan Kattan. I'm a filmmaker from Syria. Let's say I was studying the law, nothing related with the filmmaking, and after that, in the revolution in Syria, after the revolution in Syria, I found myself in the middle of the big change in my country, and in that moment we used the technology that we had in that time, like the smartphone. I started filming what's going on in my city, and let's say by experience, we found AMC, it's Aleppo Media Center. We were activists, journalists. People want to tell their story, want to be heard in that moment, and started filming in my phone the protest, the peaceful protest in that time, and after that, everything were being crazy, like the war started, the bombing, everything happening in Syria, and started to, let's say, find myself in this in telling story. From this moment until now, I'm involved with projects. One of them White Helmets, one of them Last Name Aleppo, other films. All of those films telling story about what's going on, the reality, or how the life in the war, as someone who was living or born in the war zone area in that time. After that, moved to Turkey, and in Turkey, a big earthquake happened in 2023, and suddenly find myself, let's say, filming and using my phone again, to film this unbelievable moment, all the lost we have been there. And I came to London last year in 2024 for the first premiere of our film Dept Without Mercy. It's talk about the earthquake and how was how was big crisis for the people there. And when I came to here, had problem stuck here in UK and claim asylum and get the let's say accepted. Yeah, but I went through the asylums like the process or the asylum seeker or the refugee process, and in one of these hotels of the asylum seeker, again find myself in the middle of unbelievable moment or like just trying to understand like what's going on, like how is everything, like yeah, I tried to process how I felt, how like, because I was away from my family, like in the small room with my friends, and now I'm making I started filming, and let's say 6 months ago I involved with the or 3 months ago I got the grant from Displacement Film Fund, and now I'm in the end of the stage of making a documentary about exile and let's say allies in exile. This is the working title of this film. It's a short documentary. We wish we will finish it this year, and this grant supported by Kate Blanchett, and yeah, and this film is talk about, like I try, like all the films I involved with, it is, let's say, personal journey. It is related with something I lived in, something I found myself in, and I'm trying through this film to process like this 15 years experience from the 2011 until now. I used my big archive and what I found inside the hotel, and let's say share some of how we let's say it's more about friendship, more about refugees here in UK, why we are here, how we end up here. Like it's try to answer myself, like try to talk or try to understand myself in the first place, and reflect it to like more understanding and more empathy about how it's happened for us, and because I believe in this storytelling, like because I survived a lot through the storytelling, and this is this is the main this is the film talk about, and yeah, hope it could be something worth to tell, and yeah.
That's great.
I'm really happy to be here with you. Like when I heard about this project, when I heard about like as a let's say as a refugee in the first place, as a storyteller in the second place, like when I see this kind of project, this kind of using this technology, this storytelling, this knowledge, this is give us hope. Like from the beginning, like when I were in Aleppo under the bombing, and we tried a lot to deliver our voices, to share our voices with what we like, what with this small technology like smartphone filming, blah blah blah, and until now with this new technology, or what's we can say that empathy and people understand each other, and like when I see this kind of project, I felt there is hope, to be honest, because sometimes I lost a lot any hope of anything, believing in anything related with the humanity, with like, because in the middle of war crisis, like as a human you lose all the belief. But with this kind of project, with this kind of things, I believe yes, we can do a lot of things, and I survived through this, and hope we can. I can help in any stage for doing this. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Hassan. I'm going to hand over to Ben, and Ben's going to tell you a little bit about empathy action.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Solanky. I'm the director of Empathy Action. I find it very hard to explain what we do, but I'll have an attempt at it. But also, I've got an invitation in a second. So our charity, it does what it says, empathy in action. So it's trying to look at the process of understanding through the lens of empathy some quite big situations like displacement, poverty alleviation, climate justice. Trying to understand it from perspective taking. What if it were me in this situation? How would I feel? What would I do? What would strike me? All that reflective understanding is quite crucial to understanding big issues. And this is a great starting point, and that's all it is. It's a starting point to understand. And what the charity is trying to look to do is to try and excavate down to compassion. And that is a response to this, but what it is a personal response. It's not my response, it's people's responses. And we, as an organisation, just think that is mission critical to global issues. It's not what I can do, it's what you can do, what we can do, and trying to help people understand. That's it in a nutshell. Now the more complex thing is how do we actually do it? So how do we get to empathy, and how do we use? We have found that, among other things, the use of story. Story is really, like as Mike was saying earlier, sharing a story of, being on the end of the phone, somebody empathizing. Story is a great, powerful tool. And there are different ways of stepping into story, experiencing it through somebody telling it to you, experiencing it through watching it on a screen, experiencing it through maybe some other means. And some of those other means have been, well, what if you were in it? Let's not talk about it, but what if you were in it? And take that whole adage, to understand a person, you must first walk a mile in their shoes, to a different degree. And that's what started off in, I can go into all the history, and I won't, but if you want to grab me for afterwards, I'm happy to share that with you. But what we have been doing for a while is running these immersive workshops around displacement, poverty, climate justice, soon to be on poverty here in the UK, but trying to take a first-person perspective, what if it were me in this situation? And we designed this piece called Desperate Journeys, which today we'll talk about in a bit more detail, which invites people to go on a journey. Piers took part in it, his daughter was part of this production that we had in Stroud recently. And I said to him, the outworking of that is this particular workshop, asking, could we take this into different spaces, digital spaces? But one of I was thinking, how do we explain this? And I said to him, wouldn't it be great if we could actually do a little bit of the experience today? So.
Okay, so while Piers sort of navigates the technology there, I think we certainly get an indication of that potential of film, of filmmaking, of theatre. Just this confluence of the arts and the creative approaches to empathy. Hopefully it's got the mind sort of racing. Hopefully it's sort of raised some questions. But first of all, would anyone like to sort of volunteer a question first before I think about some questions I have? Yes, please, Sabina.
Hi. I was wondering if you could reflect on the differences between empathy, sympathy, pitying someone, or maybe cognitive empathy.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there's a few definitions of empathy that are knocking around. I'll just do two: affective empathy and cognitive empathy. Affective empathy is around a mirroring experience. The whole. For example, when I don't know if any of you have arachnophobia or scared of spiders or anything, but when sometimes somebody can give you a scary spider story and they can say, and then I felt a spider crawling, and sometimes you can actually feel something on your arm. There's definitely no spider there, but you feel it. that is your mirror neurons kicking in, your affective empathy action, and you know it's how we communicate with one another. The other side is cognitive empathy, which is more perspective taking, which takes an act of imagination. A story is very useful to get you. You know, you're imagining what it's like to be someone else, and that's perspective taking empathy. The difference between that and sympathy. Sympathy is very much around not perspective taking, but judging people's situation, and then not taking into stepping into issues, but just saying, oh, you know, I feel for you, I feel sorry for you. But you know, it's more about looking upon you as opposed to looking through you. I guess the easiest thing is the word with. You know, I always think empathy has the word with. You know, with you, with somebody. But sympathy is at you. You know, looking at you. And I think that's are you looking at somebody or are you looking with them? And that's a helpful explanation of that.
I'd like to immediately jump on that distinction between on and with, and just ask some of the practical filmmakers as well as thinking about theatre, how that's articulated through whether that's through film grammar, how it's articulated through technology, how it's articulated through performance. Could you, would any of our sort of speakers today like to maybe speak to that and reflect on that? The sort of kind of nuances of that decision of on and with.
Yeah, do you want?
I think one of the, when we use the term immersive as a description for a particular kind of approach or technology, we're doing a disservice to the novel, which can be truly immersive, or the film, which can be truly immersive. So I think of immersive more as the experience you create rather than the media that you deliver it through, if that makes sense. So I've cried at How to Lose a Guy at 10 Days. I was very tired. I was on a plane. But, when they kissed, it was like they were always meant to be together. I was with them for the moment. So I think that we should be thinking, especially in terms of this project, where there's real challenges that we don't know how most effectively the technology works. So I would just like to nod towards Professor Michael Bannacy, who does a lot of work in the Department of Experimental Neuropsychology about empathy, and who is going to be involved in being very closely involved in this, in the sense that we would plan to use an in-person performance with our MA film students, with the immersive students as on project briefs, to record the physical experience. But Michael Bannacy wants to record the physical in-person experience as a baseline. And then we go on to use the technology, and by potentially having several different briefs, we see what works and what doesn't work, and we explore how the technology delivers it. So I guess I view successful artistic creation as always immersive, but not necessarily creating empathy. But I guess, does that make sense as a kind of approach? And
absolutely.
So the question, that Zhutong has all this amazing technology, but in a sense we're asking him to forget the technology and think about the story to deliver it, the technology, if that makes sense.
What do you think would be the implications if we were to really centre on the technology? And of course, we're capturing these stories, we're telling these stories through that technology. I guess, again, to all our speakers, how do you think about that technology as the mediator between you and the subject, and eventually the audience and the subject matter? Hassan, you talked about filming on a smartphone. Obviously, Zhutong, you've got the scanning technologies. Ben, could you maybe give us an indication of technology and where it might filter into empathy action? But then return to this question.
I think in terms of technology, perhaps even empathy but I would say they're both servants of story, so, and you empathize with a person rather than the technology. The technology is just serving to help. So I think, and both empathy is actually, you empathize with a person, so it's whether you connect with a person and that's through empathy and story. So I think in terms of just the technology as a servant to that, and I think if we create it as the master or it's a bit hit or miss. I think I think whether it'll actually work. I think it would work, but I just think I wonder if it will be as effective as because you connect with a person. So it's just I'd always be pointing who we're empathizing with and where is the technology. So I'd be starting from a starting point in experience making as who are we empathizing or what are the feelings that are around this, and so I would be starting with some of those questions, but even before that, what is the story here? What is and that's a similar thing I think to some of the creative process here, and then think about the technologies to serve that, and that's where I'm quite intrigued. Some of Juton's thing, and I think one of the things I've been reflecting a lot on is background and foreground. So, and I think there's a lot certainly in my mind that can be in the background with some of the immersive technologies, and I have a question mark over how much can that jump into the foreground. I believe it's possible, and I just like to see it done effectively enough. I think there's emerging technology. There's been some great examples. I think Juton was just sharing earlier. There was the Chris Milks Clouds Over Sidra, which was a 360, following there's a Syrian girl who introduced you to life in Jordan, in South Tree Camp, and it's really good. But the filmmaker says it's only good because there's a girl talking to you throughout the whole experience. And I think that's the bit I'm interested in. Where's the human contact? So background and foreground is what I keep thinking, and it's a great question to ask.
Juton, could you maybe talk about that process? When you're sort of scanning environments, when you're thinking about that end user's experience of digital spaces, as you said, you're creating content for your potential Chinese students who might want to sort of study here, giving them an insight into the campus and moving through that campus. Could you maybe talk about how you think about technology in the moment of shooting? And then Asana, I'll sort of follow up with a similar question for you, but Juton, what do you do?
Like before like today's workshop, I have no idea about what's refugees' decision-making process, because I don't have this kind of experience. And while I was thinking the performance is very, very nice. I exactly immediately know why they make this decision, and if I was them, I gonna do the exactly similar things. So while I was thinking if we can make something more realistic, for instance, the sound and music you use is very, very good, because it make me feel I'm in Middle East. But if we actually in the theater we can use projection, and we can say that's what the real room is, and when we go to the tunnel, I think it's gonna be much more immersion. Feel like you be in the water, feel like you be in the actual environment. So I think if we can combine these things together, it's gonna be interesting.
Asan, would you like to sort of speak to that and maybe think about those creative interventions? As you said, you grabbed your phone, you shot stuff as it was unfolding. Could you maybe talk about those creative interventions, perhaps at the sort of a point of assembly and editing? When you're sort of bringing together that, as you said, that archive of footage that you have in your possession, you have the stories. Could you maybe take us through the creative process then? And I think there's a nice platform here then to maybe for us to think about the ethical implications of that creative intervention, the potential impact of those creative interventions. Rasan, sorry, I'm stealing the mic from you.
Yeah, as I thought, I believe, as how I can say, let's say, if you are desperate or feeling you are what the aim we or what the purpose from all this technology as a human being. This is how I see or I look to the technology and my mind working off searching off or as someone who was desperate in one moment in the beginning in Aleppo, and after that in the earthquake, and even now with the exile, let's say. We try as a human being to see or to communicate, to try to use anything we have, even the phone, even the big technology, small technology, whatever it is, to just communicate with others that we believe all as a human being, let's say, we have the same value, same I don't know how I would describe it, like I say, because this process, or like, because I believe with this technology, if we say technology or storytelling or whatever we call it, I'm trying to survive. Everyone, like documenting your moment, documenting your life experience, documenting anything. You try to focus on this to survive from the big picture of, okay, what I will do if I didn't do this. What I will do, I will let's say fell down, or okay, this is the reality. No, I'm trying to through this to search and communicate in my way, through what I learned, to have the empathy with others, or maybe explain more about what we are lived to, because to share how it looked like from inside. Like now you know, like as someone who see the attacks hotel, like all the talk about refugee, blah 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 blah, like all that hate speech. Like, okay, what I can do, just I can do is the small part. This is the only way I know. Like, okay, let's pick up the phone, film whatever I can, share, make the story in my way that I feel it, in the and then reflect it as much as I can in reality, to put people in my shoes, or to bring people inside the hotels, to bring and this is the craziest and amazing thing with this new technology. Can we bring people to our shoes? Can we can we do that through what Ben do, through this project do? Let's do it. And I believe this is the hope. This is the key point of, okay, what we aim hope of change, hope of understand, hope of changing anything affect our life. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, I just want one
Please
point.
do.
So one of the things that Ben talked about in terms of the importance of the in-person experience was the idea of contact theory, that you meet someone, you engage with them, and the act of taking off your shoes, a physical act to enter into a space. So I think what's a really interesting question is you can't do that in digital. So what is the equivalent? So we've already been talking about the fact that the technology changes. So we were saying, well, maybe the first thing you do is meet the family, and the father shows a video. Oh, my daughter's getting engaged. Here's a video of her growing up as a child. Maybe you could see that 360 from the child's point of view, you know, and that would get you in. So I think the question that's most interesting is that the medium of delivery changes how you create empathy in the people who you want to build empathy in. And so what does that look like in these these new media, that Zhutong and all of these, brilliant brain box kind of geniuses developing the stuff? How can we then, how do we adapt the storytelling to that format in a way that delivers the same effect as looking someone in the eye and being with them? Because we know from psychological experiments that saying hello and I love you on the phone has a different hormonal reaction in a human being to being in person and having them say that to you in person. So how do we overcome those sort of barriers, I suppose?
It's a really fascinating provocation, and I was thinking through all of this, as well as my own relationship with, media and sort of empathy more broadly. This idea of the sort of aesthetics of empathy as well. How we construct it, how we communicate it. And personally, I've kind of sighed at certain films that try to forge this through a sympathetic score, or that slow build, the tension. I can see those those motifs, those conventions coming a mile off, and it tends not to have an effect on me. And equally, you know, fresh out of uni, I was involved in a number of sort of like short documentaries, and you know, we were told to sort of purposely wobble the camera at those sad moments to think about, you know, how we might forge that empathy. And it, you know, so I think, you know, there's a real sort of point here to sort of, you know, reflect, or an invitation to reflect on the aesthetics of empathy. Think about, you know, affect and how that's kind of, you know, manufactured. And, you know, I think it comes back to the idea of the sort of creative interventions, you know, the curation of an experience, or the editing of a film. Shoot on, I've got a point for you, but my mind is drawing blanks. I open it up to the room then. Are there any sort of follow-up questions? I think I saw a hand at the back. Yeah.
Sorry for that. When I think about sort of empathy in media, I feel like these are all very interesting approaches, but in the end, I feel like there's a very powerful ability that we have to de-immerse ourselves in situations where we would otherwise feel empathy. If you're approached by a poor person on the street or by a homeless person, it's very easy, you know, everyone does it really, to not pay attention, to put your headphones on or walk away fast, that kind of thing. So it's very easy, very easy to sort of get out of these situations where you would otherwise feel empathy. And I feel like when it comes to a medium that is naturally more abstract than personal contact on the streets, it's even harder to create empathy in people that don't actually have a sense of empathy already, that don't already have a basis for what the emotion is that we're trying to make them feel. So maybe very, I don't know, a very optimistic comment or question, but I feel like how do we create sort of empathy in people if we always have the option to just not pay attention?
Good question.
Yeah, I'll have a go at that. I think it's a great question. You know, it's I think, well, it's a great observation and an interesting, you know, observation. You know, when we walk past people, yeah, it's got a name. What is it? A bystander effect. You know, when you have a bystander effect, you actually, one of the things that stops you reacting, because you do see it, but you look the other way, or you turn up your volume, whatever it is, you have to actively look away, and you know, there's loads of barriers, you know, like if the altruism, you know, just completely over, you know, you can't control that, and that's a bit. And so there is talk about, you know, measured empathy, you know, trying to control it, understand it, but it's also a great skill. The other way is looking at it as a skill, like a muscle. You know, you exercise it. There are times when you rest it. There's times when you need to, you know, you need to kind of put it on ice. But there's other times when you. But what if you were intentionally looking at that exercising process and you were proactively exercising it with a view to try and look at maybe a larger objective like character. You know, what would characters in our community who actually look at actively engaging empathy, and that is a character reform, that is empathy being used in character development, characters, and that is something about culture. And so those are very interesting in the educational space, in this sort of sector, is looking at where can we be looking at empathy gymnasiums, empathy workouts, you know, things that will use our imaginatively, the cognitive empathy, taking our shoes off, actively looking at that. And that's, you know, we're in the right department, film. So, and then, but looking at it as a part, maybe a servant to a process of character development. I think that's a really interesting place of looking at culture change, and that is optimistic.
Can I throw one point in? So I'm just doing my shoes up, having taken them off. Ben talks about the importance of invitation. So I think, you know, I mean, I assume that have you cried at a film? Have you been happy? Right, okay. La La Land? No, I don't know. Huh?
Not that one, no.
Okay. Which film did you cry at? Titanic. All right. Okay. So, I think how we invite people to the experience really matters, right? Because I was on a plane. I'd been working. I'd been given 4 2.5-week shoots in the States. My son was 5 months old, and so for 2.5 in 4 months, I was away for 2.5 months of them. And I was on the plane, and How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days came on, and I'm like, oh God, I'll just watch this. This is before you could choose your films. And I was just in floods of tears, right? But I was watching the film because I was there and doing it, and it brought into a load of stuff that I was already carrying with me. So I think the question is not the technology, but how you get people to arrive and how you bring them to the experience. Because if you say, one thing I would love to do with the technology once we have it is then to do a documentary when I follow Nigel Farage around the country trying to get him to do the experience, right? But I don't think he'll come with the right frame of mind somehow. But how do we invite people, especially from people who might be actually antagonistic? And we had this experience when my daughter was performing with someone who turned up with an agenda to the performance. And how do you invite them to have the experience? Because if they come with the mindset that they're going to resist, then it's just going to reinforce all of their prejudices, right? They're just going to go, well, this is, liberal, wishy-washy, blah, 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 blah. But maybe...
Yeah, I think we arrive at a lot of places with our unconscious biases, our cultural upbringing, but there's a lot of things that I believe there is optimism to take off, almost like a cardigan that you can just hang up. And I think that is arriving well at so disarming. And I think empathy or contact has a real proven history in helping that. Somehow you don't see somebody as what's those words they use? Those really dehumanizing words, cockroaches or something like that. But when somebody's in front of you, you don't see it. You don't have that in front of you. You don't think like that. You think that's a mother, that's a father, that's a. You see them with I think there's real hopeful, humanizing moment. And I think that's a, I think Piers is right, there's a, how do we arrive at these places, trying to derobe all those unconscious biases. And that, I, for example, just, gave you a few little exercises, move chairs and all, but I think there's some innovative ways you can look at trying to maybe even call out your biases, stand there if you're, not like if you're vote reform, but, stand there if you're, I don't know, you can look at ways of trying to create, disarming that before you go in, but it's an activity. We've done that a few times and it's worked, to interesting, but I'm always looking for ways to derobe some of those biases before the experience.
Excellent question. Okay, a couple of hands, just in the middle row there, and then we'll go to Lexi.
Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you.
I was just kind of thinking about when you were talking about like unconscious biases and thinking about like the demographic of like your organisation and whether it would be like, I don't exactly know what it is, but whether you're aiming for like, because I know you were talking about primary school children and like whether thinking about like focusing more on the like new generation in order to, when somebody already has a bias about things, especially when they're older and like politics and that like we're in now. Whether it would be more beneficial to focus on kind of people who don't actually have those biases and that would be the new generation in order who would go into politics in the future, rather than like thinking about how people have already kind of like set their like mind on how they feel, and if like you're focusing on changing people's minds or maybe gently guiding people into like feeling more empathy, like what you're focusing on more or what you think is more beneficial?
Yeah, I've got just I'll just add a couple of comments and I'll be really swift. I think the practice of empathy is very good at trying to analyse, build a skill, understanding, and it lends really well to the education sector, and particularly with educators who say this is a priority. And it's sometimes we can be seen as sometimes we're seen as leading on displacement or refugee issues, when
I would prefer we led on sort of the educational side, you know, and it allows us to actually, and that also I sometimes use it to position, you know, these quite important issues not as the main heading, but as a subheading, and that can actually be quite a good way of disarming some of those, you know, oh, you're a lefty organisation, or some of those criticisms, or even, you know, those who are anti-empathy, you know, there's people out there who say it. But I think, you know, positioning it as a skill, an understanding tool, I think those are very strong in how we choose to partner. Well, we've partnered before, so I've been involved in the World Economic Forum, you know, leading with business leaders.
Dover, you've just been invited to do it at Dover.
Yeah, been invited to do it at Dover. Well, you know, we go where we're invited, and we're always looking for a champion in those areas. You know, it's not going to work without a champion, and who's going to really kind of push it. But that's what we'd say. Sorry.
Okay, so it's stuck out to me that our conversation today really is revolved around connecting with people, with individuals. You know, if you can put yourself in, you know, this person's shoes, this is how we can create empathy. But I was thinking a little broader, a little bigger, and I had two very distinct examples come to mind that I'll mention, which is this idea that, like, yes, it's more helpful. Like, I think it is very helpful if you can, like, point to a certain person or people and put yourself in their situation and try to relate to them and create empathy. But does it have to involve this element of, like, yes, I see them right here and I'm going to involve myself in the story? Because we've had some really great examples in media and film, TV, where it seems like people have been very successful at creating empathetic feelings and experiences for, like, a general situation where you may not get to know the character very well, the person very well. So one of the examples I'll pick is Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's been cited as one of the best TV shows ever. And so it's like, I think it's episode 3 or something, where you learn that Aang's, the main character's, like, civilization has been wiped out and he's, like, the last person from it. I personally think that for a show that's like a half hour long for each episode, it's really hard to feel like you know Aang as a person, but when you see him discover sort of the corpses and everything, you're like, oh my gosh. And I started crying absolutely when I just think about sort of the overall situation of his people have been genocided, he's the last person. I don't know this character yet, I mean, we will, but, you know, I have great empathy right here and I'm crying. And then the second example I'll pick is I cried at Schindler's List, sort of that one scene at the end where people are thanking him and then he sort of breaks down and says, you know, oh, I could have done more. I'm thinking this man doesn't really know all these people he saved, so it's very hard to think, oh yes, he knows all of the people very personally, yet again, it's like a situational sort of empathetic thing. And so I'm wondering, like, obviously we've been talking about technology and how it's more assistive than anything, because you need some sort of real human element to pull on your heartstrings. So I'm just wondering, like, oh, well, if we were to do that, you know, at this scale or something, like, I wonder, how does technology work in, how do we work in that sort of human element, but that doesn't necessarily relate to, like, yes, these people in front of me, what about the situation where maybe I don't know them, but, like, it's gonna get me crying anyway. And yes, I also kind of hate when I know they're going to play the sappy music and whatever. But you know what? Schindler's List was so good. I don't know any of these people. We just know one guy, and I'm still crying. So I find there's something very powerful in that.
Who would like to expand on that?
I don't mind. I feel I've spoken quite
No. You do a lot of work in empathy.
Yeah. I guess I think that's great, you know, that there are multiple mediums of doing it, you know. I have no exclusivity over empathy. I celebrate it when it's being done well, and, you know, applaud. And, you know, the emerging stuff which we're exploring here is you know, what about the hybrids between contact and non-contact? You know, can it be done in other forms? And it is really experimental, as far as I'm concerned. It may have been done before, and I think there are, you know, great illustrators. I hope to learn from it, and I hope to grasp it. And from a charity perspective, from what, you know, like I said, our goal is to inspire people, and that's the one word which our organisation homes in on. We're in the business of inspiring, and so we want people to choose to own the actions that they have being part of a solution. So we're about inspiration. So I think, game on, bring it on. And I, like you, thought Avatar was a great series, phenomenal series in fact.
Raina?
Oh yeah, please.
Hey, Mike.
I hope it's worthwhile.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you all so much for the really inspiring talks. I guess the question I had was about the kind of spaces between. We've been talking about contact zones and abstraction technologies and where the contact zones might be. And it got me thinking about language and culture in amongst all of this. So one of the joyous things about the theatrical experience we all just had, the workshop we just did, was that communication was easy. And in so many of these, particularly refugee cases, it is impossible or next to impossible. And it's, communication 3 steps removed through translators and helpers and family members. And I just wondered if, when you're thinking about creating a situation where maybe it's filmed or an immersive theatre experience, how could you maybe use language in ways that would help with that? Because it does seem to be a huge part of empathy creation as well. When we can't understand, when we don't know the culture, we don't know the language, it's much harder for us to literally communicate, right? So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that as a team, I guess, in this moment. Is that communication of language and culture through the filming and through the environments maybe, or through those performances which were so great today and I'm sure will be great going forward.
As you were speaking there, Raina, I was thinking of like Shutong, and you mentioned about not selling in a sort of in a sort of skeptical sense, but selling the sort of Bristol experience. You're selling a particular experience, a particular culture. I was thinking of this question in relation to your project. So, would you like to sort of kick us off with a response?
I come. Rina just said before, even the language is some barrier, but we use a lot of movement, from the body movement when we take off our shoes. It's very easy for me to feel engaged about the sense. So, and I was thinking for instance, if you just watch a film and you don't have anything to choose, it's easy for you to lose your attraction. And if you can make some choice, for instance, what we done in the environment, we can say, okay, if we go to the tunnel or if we go to the fan, somewhere I don't understand, I'm sorry. So I feel engaged because I make choice and I can see the impact what I am making. So I get a feedback about the environment. And so I was thinking the things the empathy action doing and what I'm doing is totally different, because our goal is not the same. Because for the empathy action is for help the people to have more understanding about other people. So we have empathy, and empathy make people do some action. Perhaps we're going to do more vote, more power things related to the politics to help more about other people. But for my project, my intention is it's much more commercial. If for me, international students, if I can spend £50,000 and I would like to know what can I learn from the environment. So the goal is different. Like you said, the technology is a serving things. It's to serve for the narrative. For this project, the empathy action project, I think is much more help people to know what other people's happening. And for my project, it's quite different. So, if we talk about this way and about the technique, actually the technique changed a lot about how we narrative. For instance, in 1920s, there's no sound in the films. And when there's sound in the films, we change the whole story narrative about how we presentate. And in 2010s, because we get the streaming, and so we have a Netflix, they make a lot of no-English language, like Narcos, this kind of series, because before that no one make no-English series. And why we can do that? Because if you watch films in a cinema, it's only 90 minutes to 110 minutes, because if it's longer, people cannot stay there anymore. But if you watch Netflix, you at your home, you can stop, whatever you want. So Netflix gives the mid-budget films a lot of space to grow. And why they can do that? Because advance of internet, people can watch their stream in their house. So and I was thinking, like, for now, like, I have very curiosity about how technology's advance can change the way we narrative, but no doubt like storytelling is the core of it. And I don't know, like, how can I use the technology to like benefit supplement to the narrative. But however, I think it was trying to do the things. Now I'm trying the basic science, the things I have my experience as an international student. And perhaps if I can use this technology to try the refugees program, it's gonna help us, all of us, use this kind of 3D goals, but know more about like what can we do in the future. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the interest of time, I'd just like to sort of just piggyback off this, but as a way of sort of stitching together all of your fantastic sort of questions or thoughts today. And I think, you know, we've kind of been skirting around this sort of issue of ethics. And I think, you know, Shutong, you kind of kickstarted my brain there when you said about the, you know, you see this as a commercial opportunity as well as, you know, its potential. You know, Ben, you know, there's still, yeah, you're driven by a remit. There is a philosophy that's underlying it, but still you kind of have to make money. Yeah. You're a charity. You know, you have charity status, you're answerable to, and the same with Hassan, you'll be answerable to, is he off the call now? You know, you'll be answerable to that pot of money from Kate Blanchett. There'll be particular obligations placed on him from distributors. And I was thinking, you know, we got questions there, but then, you know, stitch it together with the questions of complicity and involvement, immersion. I think there's the broader question here of sort of ethics. And I was wondering if anyone would like to sort of, you know, conclude, I guess, by starting to think through those sort of ethical implications with all of these sort of aspects that we've discussed today.
I mean, I have one thought. I think that with the power of AI, one of the risks of making our understanding of how to deliver empathy more effective with the technology is that then people take that learning to do stuff that's not about empathy with it. Right. You know, so for instance, I wonder whether doing the project on empathy will make you change how you present the department to international students, to make maybe you have an empathetic character who leads them through the department. You know, I mean, and I guess the one ethical concern is, are we giving more tools to then allow ourselves to be better manipulated by someone who doesn't have empathy at the heart, but sales or you know, data capture or something like that. I suppose that's one thing that springs to mind.
Yeah, the ethics of it. I guess there's a. I think it's a really important question. Is like, you know, even before why, you know, why do this and why, and I can answer it from a charitable perspective and from a small organisation, you know, that actually doesn't have any money and doesn't have any. But like you, we are trying to find ways of resourcing ourselves, both, you know, human and financial, and so trying to create value from it. And you know, we have found, you know, running programs has created, you know, from Passion has created a demand. You know, can you come and run this for our students? And you know, so can we generate value? You know, got like 10 volunteers. Can you stick them up? And you know, we've tend to partnered well, but there is a perhaps a more, you know, like, can we make this, you know, build on this? Can we do more with it? And again, as a small organisation, you know, we have found some relative successes and also found some things that haven't worked. And but I think for me, like, why do what we do? And that's where I kind of go back to. And perhaps I'm naive in some ways, and you know. At some point, you know, AI will kind of like, you know, see all what we're doing and manipulate. But I guess the naivety and the optimism, maybe they're similar, is that our work is trying to build that human connection, is trying to build that understanding, is trying to build some compassionate response, but inspiring people to do it. And that's a valuable thing in the education sector currently, and it's still valuable in character reform, character development, in trying to build up empathetic kids and trying to build up a generation of empathy. So it still has value currently under educational priorities. And that's still aspiration. That may change, that may not be the case. And I perhaps am not thinking about that, maybe got that sort of blinding. But I think it's a really important question to face, like what does the idea of deep time, what would 3 generations look like? And I guess one of the questions, I'd flip it around saying, what does a generation look like without empathy? Or where empathy has been relegated to silos and to, and I think then you can see, without like trying to but you can see it would lead in a lot of collapse in how we communicate, how we organize, and I think I take great strength from my mum and dad, and I'm pretty certain most people's mum and dads, who pretty much try to pull your ear, when you've smacked your brother, or your brother smacked you, and they like look at it from their perspective, and I'm pretty certain that's been carried down, and that feels like an ancient technology that's kind of stuck with us for thousands of years, and my guess is that's going to be a manual technology that's going to be relevant for the future. So I guess I haven't thought about the more sort of like, will AI kind of, will we be raised by AI and all sorts of yet?
Or are we training AI to get better at empathy, to then manipulate us to give us more data to get better at empathy?
Right, and I'm not there yet, but I guess that's why I come into these places, to understand more, to look at it, and there is an ethical side to it, how much do we want to go down the revealing path, and how much do we want to hold back? Just on another, there's a few other ethical sides to it, which is, you can never be somebody else, so you're never going to get there. So, you're actually, you can't get that far. So how far do you go? Is it about how authentic you can go, or is it about something else? And I think ours is more leaning towards something else. It's about the intent, the moving into the space of trying to understand. Those are both valuable things, but you're never going to be that person. And if you're going to go to the nth degree to try, there's a point where you just say, well, actually enough. We shouldn't go that further, because you're just trying to. And I think we've definitely, we need Hassan in the room, to share his moments. And we've always worked on the philosophy of a moment in all our programs where you meet somebody who would share a short vignette about their experience, and it would then just anchor the unreal, the simulated, with the real, and that would be one of our final pieces. And that's something I think would be important. How do you weave in those real moments? It doesn't have to be physically somebody, but there can be ways of listening, learning.
Excellent. I think there's a final sort of note to end on, and then we can maybe continue the conversation if you wish. And I think one thing we haven't sort of really got into, and is again one thing that was sparked by Shutong's presentation, were the glitches, the errors. And I was wondering, about this relationship between impression and expression. We've talked largely today about creating an impression of a department, an impression of a situation with a son, and an impression again of sort of people in a particular situation that's very representational. And I'm thinking, to what extent can we embrace stuff like glitches or errors? In what ways can we maybe move into that abstract territory as a way of exploring what is, or can be an abstract experience? And I don't know, maybe we can just sort of end on that question, and perhaps that's where the conversation can continue. But let's end in the more sort of formal tradition of an applause for our guests today. Hopefully it's given us an idea of how we can sort of incorporate empathy into our sort of reflections, into our creative processes, and continue to pull at this thread. So thank you very much, Ben, Shutong, and Hassan.